Well, hello everyone, and welcome to ALZ Talks. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Mary Grisby, and I'm the Vice President of Human Resources here at the Alzheimer's Association. And I am lucky to be joined with a wonderful caregiver and advocate, Shauna Sweeney from Meta. Shauna, can you just give us a brief introduction?
Yes, I'm so happy to be here, Mary, and here with all of you. Like many of you, I am a caregiver. It's an incredibly important part of my life. I am also lucky enough to hold a role at Meta as the Director of Industry and Community Marketing, and I am the new founder and CEO of a brand new tool for caregivers as well, called Tender. So I just wanted to say one thing, which is that, like many of you, caregiving plays a very integral role in so much of my life. It's really not one segment. It really splits across everything. And one of the things that I have found is finding my voice at Meta in launching an employee resource group for other caregivers has led me down a path of really kind of thinking through what are some of the core things that kind of bonds us all together in this journey. And over the course of building this community, which is over 500 people now over at Meta, really come to realize there's a couple of really simple and key ways that we can work together with our HR teams to really make this journey a little bit easier for all of us. So very happy to be here today and to be talking about this. It's something close to my heart.
Great. I can't wait to hear more about that, Shauna, as we, continue our conversation. But to kick it off, I just want to, share my own journey of caregiving, from that employee perspective. And we'll definitely talk about, things that employers can think about that maybe they can implement in the workplace as well. But, when I started at the Alzheimer's Association almost 18 years ago, I can't believe that. I really hadn't encountered the disease at all. It wasn't in my family. I was lucky to say my friends didn't talk about it. I really didn't know much about it. And, soon after that changed quite a bit. I was supporting staff who had come to work at the association who were going through their own caregiving challenges, spouses that had been diagnosed, parents that had been diagnosed. I think the first time I listened to a helpline call, I was pretty much gutted because, the devastation you felt from somebody hearing the diagnosis and needing resources. But it wasn't until about 6 months after I started my career here that things changed for me. Now, my caregiving is just a little bit different than probably most with Alzheimer's. My younger daughter was diagnosed with autism. And we were pretty much gutted too. The news was very devastating. We didn't know how to navigate it. We needed resources. Where do we go next? Cried for about a week. And I said, that's it. Get off your pity party. You've got a call to action here and make sure she's supported. But some of the things I was going through as an employee are very similar to what any caregiver, and especially those in the Alzheimer's and dementia space, go through. I had to leave early for doctor's appointments. I had to come in late. I had unscheduled PTO for things that came up at school or home. And quite honestly, as a new employee, I was really worried about how that would affect my career, my performance, and blowing through my PTO, which I didn't have much of. And, I was really fearful about that. And, I began to understand really what it was to be a caregiver and what those going through Alzheimer's really were facing firsthand. And, I am also part of that sandwich generation. I have a chronically ill parent, so I am right there in the middle, trying to navigate all of that. So I really connect with all the caregivers out there about that. But the one thing that really changed how I supported employees was that we found out that my daughter is at great risk for Alzheimer's and dementia. And I for sure am going to fight as hard as I can to support employees because I'm not going to lose her to the disease. I've made up my mind. So I wonder, in your journey, Shauna, did you think of some of those same things about your career and how that impacted you in the workplace as you were kind of approaching your caregiving?
Well, first of all, Mary, thank you for championing us and thinking about us. We're a really big part of the workforce, and we don't often speak up. I know I didn't. I've been a caregiver now for 8 years for my dad. He raised me as a single parent, and I felt just extreme responsibility when we got the bad news. He had early onset Alzheimer's at the very early age of 58. It was before any of us anticipated needing to think through any of this, and really quickly started to understand just the immense responsibility of taking on all the different aspects of another adult's life. And before even going into the tip, I just want to say to all of you out there that are listening and are working through this and are finding your way, I am here for you. There are many others here for you. It is an immensely difficult journey that it often feels like very few people would understand, but you do have community and you do have support, and you are also stronger than you give yourself credit for. It is a heartbreaker, and it's a heartbreaker in really unexpected ways. I would also say, similarly, I'm in the sandwich generation. I'm a proud stepmom. I have a 15-month-old. So just trying to juggle life, every day kind of feels like a battle, to be honest, of competing priorities and never enough time in the day to get everything done. And so just getting through the day is a huge victory. But beyond just that burden, I think one of the things that I hear often in having so many conversations with caregivers in the workplace is just the mental tax of, what am I forgetting? What is the bill that I haven't paid, or the credit card that I haven't checked up on, or the doctor's appointment that I forgot was scheduled for tomorrow and I haven't made arrangements to make sure that I've got the time off. And that can just be an incredibly taxing condition to live under for a long time. So starting to create a real system for yourself, whether that's, a Google Doc, some sort of tool to start to offload that mental tax, is so incredibly important for your mental health, and your ability to just give yourself a little bit of respite and pause, to take those free moments for what they are, which are free moments for yourself, and everybody deserves those. The other thing that keeps me up really at night is just how many there are like us. There are so many caregivers right now who are either caring for someone with Alzheimer's or dementia, or quite honestly, something else, somewhere to the tune of 54 million in the United States. And that's growing. There's about 7,000 more people, most of them working like all of us, who are becoming caregivers every day. And this is a long haul journey. It's, oftentimes years. So you need support and you need friends to be able to get through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that keeps me up at night too. Some of the same things, have I done enough? What did I forget? I think of those things. But, the one thing I want to impress on everybody, you touched on it somewhat, Shauna, is about self-care. We often forget about ourselves when we're in these caregiving roles. And it is so incredibly important to do that. We're using all of our PTO to take care of someone else. So we may run out of it at some point, and we're not going to the doctor for our own health needs. It's important to step away, if that's for a half hour or 15-minute walk around the block, whatever that looks like. Please make sure you take care of yourselves. That's one of the takeaways that I didn't embrace early on. And, there was some burnout there, and you get very taxed. So even if it's 5-10 minutes, just step away and do that self-care. We did have a question from Katie about, is there something we should never do when trying to balance work and caring for a loved one? How would you respond to that, Shauna?
As caregivers, I think we tend to think we're in this alone. And, most of us we're able to do a lot. We find ways to do things for so many people in our family, whoever we happen to be taking care of, our children. And I think it's really important to remember not to try to go it alone. Really, truly, this is too big for any one person. And it's important to ask for help. I did not do that for the first couple of years. I thought this was my problem. I needed to solve it. And I made a lot of what felt like really devastating mistakes. And looking back, they were things that, of course, anyone probably would have made a mistake while they're learning to be a caregiver. But at the time, I just like really blamed myself, and I kind of was in my own little vacuum about it. One was when my father was first diagnosed. I had never had to pay for his credit cards up until then. So it just didn't occur to me that I would need to start monitoring when those payments were due. And I missed 2 payments. It was the first month and a half of just trying to understand Alzheimer's and what this meant for our family. And because of that, my father's credit score just totally plummeted. And it was really hard to get to a place where I could forgive myself for that. And what I realized was, I wasn't opening myself up to what resources there were available out there. ALZ Association is a really good example. Your workplace is another really good example of this. Just asking for help, and you will be surprised at how much help comes back to you and helps ease the burden of what can feel like a really heavy journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I encourage you to ask your managers and your HR folks, what benefits you have in front of you. A lot of times there's free benefits like an employee assistance program or EAP, where you can call and they can help you find that respite care, or, if it's adult daycare because you need to step away for a couple hours to take care of things. There's often they're free of charge, or at least you have some 30-minute free consultations and things like that. So don't be afraid to ask for that. I know that can differ. There's some cultural boundaries to that where, some folks just don't feel comfortable asking for help outside their home, but I would encourage you to at least try that and see how that works for you. There was another question that came in, Shauna, from Betsy about statistics. What are the current statistics and 5 to 10 year projections for workers who are and will potentially be caring for a parent or dementia in the home? And then how are these statistics communicated to employers and labor organizations?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's something that I've been really digging into because this is turning into a much bigger group of us. There is estimated to be 70 million caregivers, working caregivers by 2030. That is not a small number. And this should matter to employers too, because oftentimes we're spending 24 hours a week looking after someone in our life. And a lot of the things that we need to do in order to take that care have to happen between Monday and Friday during work hours. There's just no other time to be able to do that. So what this looks like is actually a lose-lose for caregivers, but also for employees, because productivity is really challenged in trying to do both of these things at once. I think it's around $33 billion estimated in hours that employers are paying that right now are really going towards caregivers trying to juggle both of these things at once. And so I think a lot of this comes down to awareness of just how big of a group this employee basis is in a lot of different employers' workforces. And I just think it's a really important issue that we start to tackle. And it's one of the things I'm really excited about looking into in the tool we're building for Tender.
Wonderful. I know the association publishes an annual facts and figures report, which really, discusses a lot of the statistics around the disease and its prevalence, and even talks about the impact in the workplace. And, there are quite a few staggering statistics. There are probably 11 million estimated caregivers just for Alzheimer's and dementia. And, 18% of those caregivers are reducing their work hours from that full-time to part-time status to help juggle some of those ongoing needs. 57% of those had to have adjusted work schedules. And, this one bothers me quite a bit, that 6% of that 11 million retired early. That means they're spending their retirement to care for their loved one. And I've seen it before. Employees are cashing out their 401ks. They're using their Social Security benefits because that's all they can do to help manage care for that loved one. And 25% are in the sandwich generation, just like us. And honestly, the truth is here, the conversation in the HR community, I think, is somewhat stalled. We may be talking about it in one-off employers, but this is the call to action. Let's reignite the conversation in a space like the Society for Human Resource Management, also known as SHRM, and get the conversation going, get the employer groups together and figure out how we're going to tackle this, because the prevalence is real. So I just want to take you on a little bit of a journey about, the history of the benefits at the Alzheimer's Association. As I was going through my own caregiving needs, I knew there was a gap. And while we had really great benefits, it wasn't the everything. The association's immediate priority was, we've got to help constituents and their families. And so we were really good at the external caregiving piece, but the internal focus needed some attention, is how I'll call it. And, one of our key pillars of the association is to enhance care and support. And so with my manager, I started to have these conversations because it affected me. And I said, if it affects me, it's definitely affecting others who are even closer to the disease. How are we going to tackle that? So we built a compensation and benefits philosophy and said, how are we going to now, manage this philosophy? What are we going to do? So we added things like elder care facility day. Somebody has a paid day off to go vet the facilities that they may need to have a loved one placed in. Paid family leave. We often are using our PTO to care for somebody else. And when you run out of PTO, you've got nothing to fall back on to pay folks for that. Long-term care insurance. We know the cost of facility care or home care, caregiver support groups, flexible work weeks. So you don't have to worry about the late start. We're outcome focused. And, even financial and legal assistance for folks, for plan giving or other financial concerns for a loved one. Paid time off donation, and this is one of my favorites that we added. It's called My Health Matters Day, where they're meeting-free days, so you can focus and take the time you need and not worry about, gosh, I missed that meeting. The work is piling up on me. That you can use those to take care of your own healthcare needs, and we continue to advance those conversations quite a bit. So, Shauna, what would you offer to caregivers listening today? How can they advocate for themselves and other caregivers in the workplace? What are some of the tools?
First, Mary, before we even get there, that's an amazing list. Like, I'm sure so many people listening are like, wait, what? How do we work with the Alzheimer's Association?
It's pretty phenomenal.
That's really something to be proud of. And so even though I do not work with you, I am so grateful for those who are leaders like you, who are thinking about those like us, who are walking this journey day to day and really don't feel like we oftentimes have a lot of options, and to know that we have safe space in order to take advantage of these things, in order to balance out both doing a great job at work and doing a great job for our families. It's the difference between retiring early. It's the difference between total burnout. And it has a profound impact on our lives and also our families' lives. For other caregivers who are out there, I would go back to being more powerful than you realize. There is power in numbers, and the incredible amount of peer-to-peer support that is available to you when you start to really create safe space in your workplace to bring caregivers together. It's just an incredibly useful channel to start to have a real dialogue with your benefits team. So one of the great things that's come out of our own employee resource group at Meta is being able to surface where there are questions or needs or more understanding, or even, quite frankly, more space for different tools and services that we can use in our day-to-day roles. And so I would say the first piece of advice would be to start to reach out to the team and see about whether an employee resource group exists. And if not, you might be the first one to start it at your workplace, and you will be amazed how many different colleagues and coworkers want to join you in that conversation. And then really cultivate those relationships with your benefits team, create a dialogue. The other thing that I would say is one of the biggest things that surfaced has actually led me to my new dream, which is about what tools could be built that aren't possible yet or don't exist that would really help improve a lot of the inefficiencies that we're seeing and how we're having to spend our time tracking and compiling records and trying to manage prescriptions. There's just a lot that can be done in this space. And that wouldn't have been possible without an incredible relationship with my own benefits team, who has really sort of activated and ignited a passion in me to think about, how do we make this experience better for all of us? We know it can be, we know the technology exists. And then to really start to think about it together versus alone again. I've got a question for you, Mary. You've been talking a lot of me, and I actually think, just given your expertise and what you've been able to do, even within the ALZ Association, there's a lot of employers out there who are listening. What do you think they should be thinking about right now as they're starting to think about their own benefits and how to really lend more support where they can to their employee caregivers?
I think, it's starting to think outside of traditional benefits, right? We've got our traditional offerings, and, I think, the more we spark up the conversation, the more it's going to be at the forefront for employers to think about. And there's really been just this focus on working parents and how they take care of their immediate family and children. But, we've got to make some progress and a focus on mental health, right? We've learned this from the pandemic, but it really applies in this situation too, is just making sure we provide the supports that employees need through all the different life cycles, right? We need to make sure that employees don't feel like they're alone in their journey, and that we're educating them about the benefits that they have in the workplace. We absolutely have to make time to educate staff and managers about those benefits, because we're not always hearing about it in HR. An employee may trust their manager and go to them. So part of it is just really simple. Educate your managers, and if they pick up on a cue, they can pass it on to HR, and focus on outcomes. Outcomes are more important. So is it, in some places, the flexing of hours may not, work. I get that. But, a lot of times that the start and stop times really don't matter. Are the outcomes there? Are they getting the work done? Is it satisfactory? So think about it in that way. And in this market, flexibility should be our best option, because we still want to attract and retain employees. We want to make sure that we don't have a high cost of turnover and losing that productivity. We want to make sure that we continue that productivity, that we don't lose any speed there. And, addressing employees' diverse needs, not just when they're having children, but when they have elder care as well, because that's eminent. And job satisfaction. If you have somebody who is really satisfied with their job, your productivity is going to go up, out the roof. And, you're eventually going to decrease that unscheduled absenteeism. You're going to decrease the employee stress when you have benefits that support them through these needs. And again, it's that productivity number is really going to change. Shauna, you came from Meta, big tech, very progressive employer. And, what are they doing, by the way of employee caregivers?
Oh man, I can't tell you how lucky, I didn't even realize how lucky I was to be able to take advantage of some of the benefits that the incredible benefits team has sort of enabled and made possible for those who are working at Meta. They're so cutting edge in so many ways. And I feel very lucky now to know some of the very courageous individuals behind a lot of the decisions they've made. Renee Albert is one, Lisa Poon is another. These are very generous leaves in ways that you wouldn't expect for caregiving. And I've taken advantage of many of them. So it's not just maternity or parental leave. You're really looking at caregiver leave, which I have taken advantage of actually just a year after we got the diagnosis with my dad, to take a full month with him and really go through a number of his favorite activities in a way that I knew I was almost never going to be able to do again in that way. And it was just an incredibly profound opportunity for my family to gather and to heal and to really celebrate my dad and all the things that he loved, which was amazing. Another is mental health leave. I have to say, I can't emphasize this enough. The benefits team there, they brought in a service called Lyra, which was actually founded by another Facebooker, if you will. So there's a history of activating us to think through what services would really empower our workforce. But being able to really take care of myself and block time for that, the woman who's standing before you is a direct result of having had that infrastructure of support behind me to really process some of the most difficult and heartbreaking moments of this caregiving journey. And there's so many, you don't know where they're coming from. One quick story, and I know that all of you probably have hundreds of these. I was changing my dad's energy bill. This feels like a very simple, straightforward task. And I had to have my dad on the line to be able to say my name because I had his power of attorney. And it was someone like customer service on the line, and it was like, okay, Mr. Sweeney, can you tell me who's on the line and who your daughter is, who's going to take over your energy bill? And that was the moment that I realized my dad could no longer say my name. And a simple or a seemingly simple task like changing an energy bill becomes this sort of devastating moment in my journey with my family. And so you just never know where the heartbreak is coming from. And so you need as much support as you can. And sometimes that comes from just being able to share that with other caregivers. That's where I founded the employee resource group and was just able to start to share some of the highs and lows of this journey. And the benefits team has been very supportive of that. They, as I mentioned before, have been incredibly supportive of me even pushing this further and thinking about what tools can caregivers use now that could even make this easier. And one of the directors of benefits has actually joined Tender's advisory board. So stay tuned for some, hopefully, what will be pretty useful things from us coming pretty soon.
That's very exciting. And I'm sorry to hear about, that interaction, with your dad. That's so difficult. And I'm sure there's probably so many more instances of that and having to go through that. But, I can't focus enough on how mental health is really a priority here. There's such a stigma around it. So the self-care part of mental health and making sure you have an outlet of support to talk to. Please reach out when you need the support, because you truly do need that in a caregiving role.
Yes, absolutely. And I do think, like, outside of the workplace too, looking for moments and pockets of community. I would just say a huge thank you to the ALZ Association for so many moments, but one in particular where I was able to actually invite my team to take place in a walk to end Alzheimer's across the Brooklyn Bridge. I wasn't sure if any of my team would come and join me in this. It was more of like, okay, this seems like a really fun way to spend a Saturday. And almost my entire team showed up in solidarity with me. And it was this just incredibly emotional moment of celebration, of being able to unite these two, what had felt like very separate parts of my life, into one place. And it's a day that I'm never going to forget. It's one of my favorite memories of being able to bring these two things together.
I love that. And just, creating that extended support. Our work families are just as important as, our immediate families. And to have that extension, you're very lucky to have the support, this well-rounded support. And I wish others had that same, outlet as well.
Well, on that note, what resources and what advice would you offer other human resource professionals and employers?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that's just really simple is educate your managers and your employees. Make sure that resources are accessible, that they're easy to find, that they know what's offered, or they know who to go to get information, and encourage those managers to share the benefit information. I can't say it enough. Participate in open dialogue. Be vulnerable. Don't say that you know it all or you've got the exact right solution. Be open to the feedback. Ask your employees what they need. You may not always be able to give them what they need, but maybe it's a small step in that direction. But hear what they have to say, because if you don't ask, you're really not going to know. And then they will feel like they're being heard if you're at least asking for their feedback or how you can help them. And, embrace workplace flexibility. It is now where we live. The hybrid working environment has been very effective, at least for some caregivers, as they kind of straddle, the boundaries of caregiving, especially in the sandwich generation. But be as flexible as possible when you can. Shauna, this has been a phenomenal discussion today, and I know I could probably talk to you for hours about this. There's so much more to cover, but we've really covered a lot today, and hope that this talk helps to initiate some more important conversations in the workplace. There are a lot of resources out there, so take advantage of those resources, you're not alone in this. We're not alone in this. Some support communities are available to you. So connect, with others who are working and caring for loved ones with dementia. We have a new Facebook group called the Support Community for Dementia Family Caregivers in the Workplace. That's a really long name. We will send this out to you. Or on our online caregiving forum, alzconnected.org. alz.org and our 24/7 helpline. That telephone number is 1-800-272-3900. These are always good places to start to learn more about the disease, support for caregiving, and just find the support that you need. As an HR professional, we also have the Society for Human Resource Management as a helpful resource for the employers that may be on the line on this call. And, I really appreciate everyone's attention to this incredibly important matter. That's all the time we have for today. And thank you again for joining.